everyone, it's Mauricio Rauld here, McElroy.com's legal advisor, and today I figured we'd talk about asset protection 101 for real estate investors. It's no surprise that we live in one of the most litigious countries in the world where anybody can sue anybody for anything, and so it's really important for you guys to think about how do I protect my hard-earned wealth to make sure nobody can come and take it away from me. We're going to use real estate today as an example, but obviously asset protection covers a lot of different asset classes. But one of the biggest mistakes I see, even for people who actually have amassed quite a bit of wealth, is they tend to hold their real estate in their personal name. They literally have direct title from their personal name into the property. And that causes a lot of issues. Most people justify that by saying, well, hey, I'm just starting, I don't really have a lot of money, or maybe, hey, I have insurance and I'm going to rely on insurance. One of the issues that I have with insurance is even though it should always be your first line of defense, there is always issues that come up with insurance. First and foremost is you might be underinsured. You might get $1 million policy or a $2 million policy or even a $5 million policy. But what happens if something really catastrophic happens at the property? You know, somebody, gets seriously injured or even dies and, they're suing you for $5, $10, $100 million. You're not going to have enough insurance to cover that. The other issue with insurance is they make a living with exclusions. Unless you're having a really good insurance attorney review your policy, those policies are so freaking complicated. There's exclusions where they literally exclude things from your policy on a certain page. They stick it back in page 34, and then they take it back out on page 77. So it's really difficult to really understand what exactly your policy covers. And it's happened time and time again where somebody thinks that they have coverage, they think they have an insurance policy in place, have been making their premiums, but it doesn't cover them. And so that's something that's really affects the asset protection part. And the last thing is obviously there's insurance companies that end up going bust. When it's time to go to the insurance company and say, hey, I've got a claim, they've filed for bankruptcy, they're no longer around. So again, I don't want to shy away from insurance. Insurance is critical. It's always your first line of defense, but the asset protection strategies and structures, think of them as a backstop. Right? Once you've got the insurance, if the insurance isn't there for whatever reason, you want to have a backstop. So let's talk about some basic entities, entity structuring for real estate investors. Now, let's look at the issues that you might face owning a piece of property. Most people think of a tenant that somehow slips and falls on your property, or maybe a boiler explodes and causes injury. Something happens at the property, and they are then going to come after you and sue you. The owner of the property is legally responsible for the damage. So one of the things you'll hear about is not having direct ownership in the property, but having an LLC own the property so that you are now no longer the owner of the property. So let's take a look at what that would look like. If there's an attack on the property level and something happens in the property and they sue the property owner, well, now the property owner is an LLC, a limited liability company, and it's not you. So your exposure is limited to whatever's inside this LLC, which typically is the property itself or whatever equity the property has. And if you've got a bank account that has some cash in it, that'll be exposed as well. But all of the other assets that you own will not be exposed to that issue. This is one of the main reasons people think about an LLC and why they're so popular in the real estate world. Now, what if something happened to you unrelated to the property? Meaning you get into a car accident, or you back up from your driveway and you hit the kid on the skateboard, or you maybe even get into a business dispute. Something happened that has nothing to do with the assets, and there's actually a judgment against you right here. Once there's a judgment, people start looking around and saying, hey, what does that person have or own for me to go after? Right? If you didn't have the LLC, that's going to be problem number one, because they're going to be able to get to your assets directly because you own them. But if you have an LLC in place, especially if you set it up in a proper jurisdiction, something like in Nevada or Wyoming or a Delaware, you've probably heard of those three. In those states, the plaintiff cannot actually get access to your LLC, because if they could, they would just, now if they're the owner of the LLC, they would just sell the property and get their judgment. But let's just say there's $1 million judgment here, and they say, Judge, I want you to give me the LLC that this individual has because I can pay my judgment. The judge is going to say, not so fast, I'm not going to give you the LLC, I'm going to give you just the right of distribution. So instead of giving you ownership or management, you're just going to get whatever distributions, whatever cash you were getting from that property, those are going to get diverted to the plaintiff. This is what we call a charging order. So a charging order only applies in scenarios where you're getting sued irrespective of your properties. In that case, we want to make sure that you own an LLC in a state that has very strong charging order protection. Over here, if you get sued in your property, again, a slip and fall or something happens to the property, then any LLC really should do its job, because that's the purpose of the LLC, is to limit your liability to whatever's inside the LLC. Once you have multiple properties in your portfolio, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and create separate LLCs for each of these properties. But if you decided not to do that and put everything in one particular LLC, like so many people do, then what happens is if something happens to property number 1, the LLC is responsible, and because it owns property number 2 and property number 3, then all of those assets are exposed. That's one of the main reasons we like to separate each property as much as we can into their own LLC. Well, hopefully that's been helpful for you guys, and looking forward to the next video.